And what would it look like if we did? So let's start with Old Testament thoughts first. Because the Old Testament is full of God encounters, but it's full of unique God encounters. God shows up in the garden in the cool of the day to talk to Adam and Eve. Adam hides in the bushes, covering himself with fig leaves. You almost have this comical encounter. It's interesting that God's first physical encounter with man's almost comic. Man's hiding in the brush, God's standing in the path going, "Where are you?" "I'm hiding in the bush." "Why are you hiding in the bush?" "Because I'm naked." "Who told you you were naked?" You get this back and forth conversation. God's conversational. He's a questioner. He's not angry. He seems a little hurt. He seems a little scared. He's a dad that's lost his kids, and he's asking them where they are and why did you let somebody lie to you and what are you wearing, son? You didn't leave the house in that. That's not what I put you in. And so you get that, you almost get that maternal side of God right out of the gate in the Bible of this chasing our children down, not with a stick to beat them, but if we're carrying the stick, it's to hit whatever we think has our kid in its jaws because we're there to protect them. And that's our first glimpse of God. But the Bible then just blows up with God encounters. Abraham has God and two angels visit him at his tent. Abraham is so convinced it's God, he gets down on his face and starts to worship him. He's never seen God before. Would you just randomly get down on your face and start to worship a guy that knocks on your front door? And yet here's Abraham. When he sees him, he knows him. Jacob goes in the middle of a desert, lays his head on a rock, and goes to sleep and has a dream. And there's angels going up and down on a ladder, and he sees God standing at the top. I don't know how he knows what God looks like, but he's positively convinced it's God because when he wakes up in the morning, he goes, "Surely God was in this place and I didn't know it. I'm going to build an altar right here because I think this is the house of the Lord." And he calls it Bethel, which in the Hebrew means house of God. Because he's convinced, I just looked into the heavens, I saw God, this is what he looks like, this is where he lives. And nobody thinks you're weird in the Old Testament when you talk that way. You get to just say that. I think I saw God last night and I started a church and called it Bethel. And that's where God lives. And the Bible just blows up with this over and over and over. And Moses is walking on the backside of the desert. And there's a flicker on the hillside and a bush burns, but it's not smoking because smoke means consumption and something's weird. Brush fires have smoke, but this one doesn't. So Moses says, "I believe I'll turn aside and see this bush that burns but is not consumed." And when he gets up there, a voice speaks to him out of the bush and says, "Slip your shoes off your feet. The ground you stand on is holy." And Moses doesn't run the other way like most of us would or get out his recorder to make sure he catches the audio. I realize he didn't have a recorder. But he slips his shoes off his feet and he does everything the bush tells him to do. And he never thinks it's weird or demonic. He knows it's God. He watches God heal. He listens to God confront his reality, his tragedy. He feels free to question God and receive questions from God in return. He walks down that mountain. He's a different man because the Old Testament has encounters with God. What I told you at the beginning, though, becomes more clear as you walk through the Old Testament that God doesn't keep doing it the same way. One time he's walking through a garden, another time he's in a burning bush, and another time he's in a dream at the top of a ladder, and another time he's knocking on your front door wanting to have lunch with you. And one time he's at the edge of a cave with Elijah and he's a still small voice. And another time he stands in the middle of a road like an angel and a donkey talks to Balaam because the donkey sees God where man can't. And the Old Testament has God showing himself however he can. And then comes Jesus. You take that composite body of all of it, all the way up to John 1 where John goes, "No one ever got to see God's face." But even John knows it's not quite true. Because John has the Hebrew Scriptures in his past too. And he knows there's been an Adam and an Abraham and a Jacob and an Elijah and a Moses. And what John means is that you don't see God like you see me. But John's not naive. He knows that men have been encountering God. In fact, John ran around with Jesus for 3.5 years. And so John changes gears in the middle of the verse and goes, "No man's ever seen God's face, but I saw his son. And when I saw his son unpacked his dad constantly. His son exegeted his father. His son revealed to me what his dad looked like and sounded like and loved like and responded like until I hung out with Jesus long enough I felt like I'd seen the face of God."